Well, some big changes in C-suite executives over the past couple of weeks due to conduct or approval of such conduct. First, the chair of AMP, now this week the CEO of QBE. It was swift and decisive action by the board, a stark contrast to the process of the former, and puts corporate Australia very much on notice that culture and conduct is very much a financial issue, as it is a moral issue for more people. And Culture Strategies Managing Principal, who better to talk about this, Joydeep Hor, joins us live in the studio. Joydeep, pleasure to have you on the program. Look, I'm sure this is something that you've been asked a lot about, well, throughout your career, but also particularly in the last few weeks. It's a big, it's a big news story, I guess, in terms of garnering headlines around Australia. But it is a big story, to see what happened at QBE and the difference between how AMP dealt with it to QBE. It's showing that perhaps culture is becoming more and more important.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what's interesting, though, is that if one objectively looks at the conduct that is attracting those headlines in 2020, it is actually far milder, I know that might sound very strange, than the conduct that was actually occurring 5-10 years ago. And I think this is a really important challenge for organisations, because in addition to them having to be adaptable and agile, what they're going to have to face into, and I think the AMP example is a very good one, of some of these issues are not necessarily live. They're issues that are coming back from things that have happened 2, 3, 4 years ago. And so I think it's a little unfair for a lot of executives to be criticised for saying, well, you should have known better, because a lot of them would say, well, had I known about Me Too, whether this is justifiable or not, there are a lot of people who'd say, well, I've changed my behaviours post Me Too. Now, we can all have our view about the rightness or wrongness of that. But from a corporate decision-making point of view, culture is not just relevant and more relevant, it's also about what is that historical culture. Can you fix that moving forward? And how much of this is about message sending as opposed to just fair decision making?
You talked about it, and I know I've read a few of your articles on this, and you've talked about the boundaries between a legal issue and a moral one have become awkwardly and terribly conflated. That's what you've said. Is that sort of what you're alluding to here? Yeah,
absolutely, because I think what we find is in a lot of the commentary around these issues, there will be statements made about the nature of, say, a person being married, for example, or there being a big age difference between the alleged perpetrator.
Which is what we saw previously in QBE, even though there was, no official wrongdoing. It was a cultural issue.
Exactly. But I think that it's this point around that the objective conduct is not necessarily worse, but there is so much more attention that is being paid to these issues.
I just wonder, with it from a culture perspective, is it obviously has got to be a good thing to get people talking. Often, people steer away from this topic, don't really want to be involved in it, don't really want to talk about it. Is having these sort of headlines from a cultural perspective a positive thing for boards and companies more broadly?
Well, I think there is a big watch out in this, and it's often referred to as the Pence effect, which refers to a situation where male executives become so nervous about interactions that they might have from a career development and ordinary work interaction point of view with females, because of the concern around the lowering of the threshold in terms of objective conduct, but how it might be twisted, how it might be reported, and how career damaging or career ending it might be. So this is always about a sensible balance, and it's about organisations being clear, I think, first and foremost, on what's appropriate in their organisation, what isn't, and you can't have a shifting sands approach in relation to that as an organisation.
So Joydeep, what's the best practice here? Now, you're an expert in this space. Obviously, a lot of people haven't got the message through. The message has also been twisted over the years. What is the best practice to go and try and avoid what we've seen over the past couple of days, both at QBE and AMP?
Well, you've got to educate, and the message that we give to our clients is the problem that they have with their education is it's too focused on the black and white, and the real issues are in the grey. By that I mean that if you're telling people, oh, by the way, it's illegal here to engage in sexual harassment, everyone will look at you blankly and say, yeah, I know that. It's illegal to engage in bullying, everyone will look at you and say, yeah, I know that. What they don't understand is that when you're out drinking with colleagues after a Christmas party, or you might be sending someone a message because you've had a few drinks and you don't think there's anything wrong with it, and you think you're doing so in your own time, that is squarely a workplace issue that is going to come back and potentially bite you. That is the education around the grey. And the problem is that we're not only dealing with an expanding grey, we're also dealing with a revisionism of the grey that you might have engaged in 5 years ago, we're actually going to hold you accountable to now.
That is something we need to keep an eye on, and that's for sure. And I'm sure that QBE won't be the last one, because we just saw that happen so swiftly for QBE. I imagine other boards are sort of taking notice. Should we talk Job Tweaker 2.0? Of course, this is another issue we're watching, because JobKeeper enabling directions. This is obviously what businesses are interested in. There's been a whole raft of changes Can you shed some light on it?
Yeah,
for
so
us, Joydeep?
legislation passed only in the last 24 hours in relation to this. So I think the best message for business is you've got to be clear on whether you qualify or don't qualify.
Yeah.
But what flows from that is that in terms of how you manage your workforce, you've got to be clear on what are the directions that you are allowed to issue if you do qualify. The tweak now is that there's going to be a separation between those businesses who did qualify but might not qualify in the future, and those businesses who will continue to qualify and nothing has changed. And the relevant tweak is that what you can direct your workforce to do, by which I mean, can you direct them to take annual leave? Can you direct them to work less hours? Can you direct them to work from different places? All of those kinds of things, which JobKeeper allowed employers to do. You now have to be careful in terms of if the qualification rules have impacted you differently, you may not have the same level of flexibility as you did before.
Right.
Joydeep, I was going through some of the changes with JobKeeper. There's a few curly ones in there. Do you expect there's going to be some issues when it comes to implementation and tracking, given the changes we're seeing in the legislation?
There will be issues, and I think the issues will actually be less about the drafting of the legislation and interpretation, but more about pressure. I mean, we talk about confirmation that Australia is in a recession. That pressure is going to start to be felt more and more. $1,500 a fortnight, $1,400 to $1,200 to $1,000.
Yep.
That is contributing enormous pressure on households and individuals.
Sure.
Pressure, we know, in organisations is what raises complaints and grievances and discontent. So organisations, need to be fully aware of the law and accounting stuff, but they have to be very, very careful as to how they manage their people at this time.
Gosh, you must have the busiest year ever, Joydeep, this year. There's a lot on your plate, I feel.
It'll be a memorable one, no doubt.
Tailwinds into headwinds for different people.
Yeah, exactly. Joydeep, appreciate your time, as
Thank you.
always,
Thanks
on the
for having
program.
me.
Thanks for taking us through it.